This 4-year-old beggar girl is kicked out of church for asking for food, but a millionaire watched everything from the back pew and something happens. Comment what you think will happen. Your opinion is very important, and subscribe to my channel to support my work. Your help is very important. The heavy silence of St. Jude's Church was broken by a sound that made all the parishioners turn their heads, the soft noise of bare feet scuffing on the marble steps. Lily, just 6 years old, was trying to balance herself after being pushed out of the church, her small hands grabbing at the air, searching for support that wasn't there. "We don't want beggars here," shouted the janitor, a burly man who pointed his finger at the girl as if she were a pest. "This is God's house, not a shelter for bums." Tears streamed down Lily's dirt-streaked face, mixing with the dust that clung to her skin. Her tattered dress, which had once been a light blue, now looked more like a faded rag. She had only whispered a simple question to the lady next to her, if she could have a little piece of the bread that would be blessed at communion. "I just wanted a little bit," the girl murmured, her words lost in the echo of the church. From the last pew, Richard Huntington watched the scene with clenched fists. At 52 years old, the real estate tycoon had seen a lot of injustice in the world, but something about that child being humiliated in the middle of Sunday Mass awakened a fury that he hadn't felt in decades. Richard was known in Oak Creek for his reserved personality and perfectionistic business methods. He rarely smiled, rarely spoke more than necessary, and always kept a calculated distance from people. But at that moment, seeing Lily stumble on the steps as she tried to get up, something broke inside his armored chest. The girl finally managed to stand up, wiping her nose with the back of her dirty hand. Her big, dark eyes scanned the faces of the parishioners, who stared at her with disdain or indifference. There was no compassion in those faces, only silent judgment. "Get out of here," continued the janitor, making aggressive gestures. "We don't want you brats messing up our church." Lily took a few faltering steps towards the door, her childish dignity fighting against the humiliation. She didn't understand why asking for food was so wrong, why people looked at her as if she were a dangerous animal. Father Michael, a man of 45 with hair already graying at the temples, stepped up to the pulpit with his usual serious expression. He had witnessed the whole scene, but didn't move a muscle to intervene. His hands firmly gripped the edge of the pulpit as he tried to find words to continue his homily on Christian charity. "My brothers and sisters," he said, his voice echoing through the stone walls, "today we speak about the importance of helping our neighbor." The irony wasn't lost on Richard, who slowly rose from his pew. His footsteps echoed across the marble floor as he walked towards the door, ignoring the curious glances of the other parishioners. He needed to get out of there before he did something he'd regret. Outside, the strong sun of upstate New York beat down on the church square. Lily had sat down in the shade of an old oak tree, hugging her knees to her chest. Her tears had already dried, but the streaks they left in the dirt on her face told the whole story of her humiliation. Richard stopped a few feet away, watching the girl in silence. There was something familiar about her, something that stirred up memories buried long ago. Maybe it was the way she held her head up even after being rejected, or maybe it was the intelligence that shone in her eyes despite her young age. "Are you okay?" he asked finally, his voice sounding rougher than he intended. Lily looked up, studying the tall man in the dark suit who was approaching. He didn't seem threatening like the janitor, but she had learned to distrust strangers. "Yes, sir," she replied, her voice small but firm. Richard noticed that, even scared and humiliated, the girl maintained good manners. Someone had made an effort to educate her properly. "What's your name?" "Lily, sir." "And where do you live?" "Lily?" The girl hesitated, biting her lower lip. "With my grandma Rose, in the yellow house by the creek." Richard knew the area. It was a poor part of town where simple houses housed families who lived with the bare minimum. He had passed through there a few times during his business dealings. but had never paid real attention to the people who lived there. "Does your grandmother know where you are?" "She's working at Mrs. Abernathy's house today. She said I could come to Mass alone if I promised to be back before lunch." The responsibility with which the girl spoke about her commitments impressed Richard. At 6 years old, she already demonstrated a maturity that many children her age didn't possess. "And do you always come to church?" "Every Sunday, sir. Grandma Rose says it's important to talk to God, even if we don't have much to offer." Lily's words echoed in Richard's mind for the rest of that afternoon. As he drove his pickup truck through the dirt roads of Oak Creek, he couldn't forget the dignity with which the girl had handled the humiliation. There was something about her that awakened a need for protection that he thought he had lost forever. That night, sitting in his big, empty house in the hills surrounding the town, Richard wondered when was the last time he had felt the desire to help someone without expecting anything in return. The years of loneliness and bitterness had hardened his heart so much that he barely recognized the man who had once dreamed of having a family. But Lily had awakened something different in him, something that scared him as much as it attracted him. And as he watched the lights of the city come on in the valley below, Richard made a decision that would change his life forever. He would find out more about that brave girl and her grandmother, and would find a way to help them. What he didn't imagine was that this decision would lead him to discover secrets that would shake not only his own existence, but the entire structure of the small community of Oak Creek. The following Monday, Richard woke up with a determination that he hadn't felt in years. After a restless night, thinking about the girl who had been humiliated in the church, he decided that he needed to act. But his cautious nature prevented him from approaching the family directly. Instead, he opted for a more discreet strategy. During his lonely breakfast in his spacious kitchen, Richard planned his first attempt to help. He knew the owner of the Central Market well, Millie, a talkative woman who knew everyone's life in town. It would be easy to find out more about Lily and her grandmother through her. "Good morning, Mr. Huntington," greeted Millie when he entered the establishment. "What a surprise to see you here so early." "Good morning, Millie. I need to put together a basic food basket," he said, maintaining a casual tone. "For one of your employees?" "Something like that," he replied vaguely. "Do you know a lady named Rose? She lives in the yellow house by the creek." Millie's face lit up with the opportunity for gossip. "I sure do. Grandma Rose, poor thing, works like a dog washing clothes for the rich families in town. Raises a little granddaughter all alone, Lily. A beautiful girl, but I feel so bad for their situation." "Situation?" asked Richard, feigning disinterest while choosing products on the shelves. "Oh, Mr. Huntington, it's heartbreaking. The girl sometimes comes here with a few pennies that her grandmother gave her, wanting to buy a pack of cookies. Always polite, never asks for anything, but you can see that they're in need." Richard felt his chest tighten as he imagined Lily, counting pennies to buy food. And the family, don't they have anyone else? "Not that I know of. Grandma Rose appeared in town about 6 years ago with the little girl. Never talked much about where they came from. Reserved people, you know how it is." As Millie spoke, Richard put together a generous basket. Rice, beans, oil, sugar, coffee, cookies, fruits, and some sweets that he imagined Lily would like. His intention was to leave it anonymously on the doorstep of the yellow house. "Wow, what a nice basket," commented Millie. "Whoever receives it will be very happy." "I hope so," murmured Richard, paying the bill. That afternoon, he drove to the poor part of town, looking for the yellow house that Lily had mentioned. It wasn't hard to find. A simple construction, well kept despite the peeling paint, with a small yard where clothes swayed on the makeshift clothesline. Richard parked the pickup truck a safe distance away and watched the house for a few minutes. There was no one in sight. Quickly, he took the basket and placed it on the porch, along with a note that said only, "From a friend who..." Wishes you well." Returning home, Richard felt a strange satisfaction. It had been a long time since he had done something purely altruistic. For years, all his actions had been calculated, aiming for profit or advantage. Helping Lily and Rose without expecting anything in return awakened in him an almost forgotten sense of purpose. However, the next morning, as he casually passed by the street with the yellow house, Richard was shocked. The basket he had left the day before was in the trash next to the house, completely untouched. He stopped the pickup truck and got out, incredulous. All the products were there, some still in their original packaging. The note had been torn and thrown away with the rest. "It can't be," he murmured, picking up a few items to check if they were really the same ones he had bought. At that moment, a rough voice sounded behind him. "If you're looking for something in the trash, you won't find anything worthwhile." Richard turned around and was faced with an elderly woman with grey hair tied in a tight bun. Rose was 73 years old, but her brown eyes still shone with a steely determination. Her hands, calloused from hard work, held a bundle of wet clothes. "I was just—" Richard stammered, being caught red-handed. "I know very well what you were doing," said Rose, approaching with firm steps. "You were the one who left these things here yesterday, weren't you? There was no point in denying it. It was me. But why did you throw everything away? It was good food. It could have helped you." Rose's face hardened even more. "We don't need charity from anyone, mister, much less from rich people who come here to do charity to ease their conscience." "It wasn't charity," protested Richard. It was what? Pity? Sympathy for two poor women?" Rose's voice rose in tone. "You can keep your pity for those who need it. I work for my pennies and raise my granddaughter with dignity." Richard was speechless before the woman's pride. He had expected gratitude, maybe even tears of relief. He wasn't prepared to be rejected so vehemently. "You don't understand," he tried again. "I saw your granddaughter at church last Sunday. What they did to her was unfair." "Lily told me about what happened," said Rose, her voice getting lower but no less firm. "And she also told me about a man in a suit who talked to her afterwards. That was you, wasn't it?" "It was," admitted Richard. "Then listen carefully, Mr. Huntington. Richard Huntington." The name seemed to cause an impact on Rose, who stepped back half a step. "Huntington, the owner of the real estate company?" "I am." "Then listen carefully, Mr. Richard Huntington," she said, regaining her composure. "We don't want your charity. Lily will grow up knowing that everything we have was earned with our own sweat. I don't want her to think that she needs the pity of rich men to survive." "But why? Why refuse help when it could improve your lives?" Rose hesitated for a moment, as if debating internally whether she should answer. Finally, she said, "Because I've seen what rich men do when they think they can buy the gratitude of poor women, and it never ends well." There was a deep pain in those words, a story that Rose clearly didn't intend to tell. Richard realized that he had touched an old wound, but couldn't understand why his attempt to help had been interpreted so negatively. "I don't want to buy anything from anyone," he said sincerely. "I just wanted to help a child who went through an unfair situation." "Then help by changing the world so that children like Lily don't have to go through unfair situations," replied Rose. "Don't come here afterwards offering crumbs as if that solves anything." At that moment, the door of the house opened and Lily appeared in the doorway. She was wearing the same faded blue dress from Sunday, but it was clean and well ironed. Her hair was carefully combed, held in two braids that framed her face. "Grandma, is everything okay?" asked the girl, looking nervously between Rose and Richard. "Yes, my dear. This gentleman was just leaving." Lily recognized Richard, and her eyes lit up slightly. "It's the man from church," she said timidly. Yes, it's me, replied Richard, crouching down to be at the girl's height. How are you, Lily? Fine, thank you. Rose positioned herself protectively between her granddaughter and Richard. Lily, go inside and finish your homework. But Grandma, go, said Rose firmly. The girl reluctantly obeyed, but not before casting one last curious look at Richard. There was something in the way she observed him that stirred the businessman in a way he couldn't explain. When they were alone again, Rose crossed her arms. Now listen carefully, Mr. Huntington. I don't want to see you hanging around our house. Again, Lily is a good and intelligent girl, and I won't let anyone confuse her head with false hopes. What hopes? Asked Richard, genuinely confused. That life will get easier just because a rich man decided to play savior, replied Rose. Life isn't like that. Life is hard work and dignity, not depending on the goodwill of strangers. Richard remained silent for a long moment, processing the woman's harsh but truthful words. Finally, he nodded. I understand your position, Grandma. Rose, I apologize if I offended you with my attempt to help. You didn't offend me, she said, her voice softening slightly. Just worried me. Men like you don't usually take an interest in people like us without having any reason. As he walked back to his pickup truck, Richard reflected on Rose's words. Was she right to distrust him? What were his real motivations for wanting to help Lily? And why had the simple mention of his last name caused that reaction in the woman? In the days that followed the tense encounter with Rose, Richard found himself obsessed with thoughts about Lily and her grandmother. He tried to return to his normal work routine, but constantly found himself looking out the window of his office towards the lower part of town, where the yellow house was located. It was Thursday when he decided to pass by the street again, just to check if everything was okay. He didn't intend to stop or bother anyone, but what he saw made him slam on the brakes. In the backyard of the house, under the shade of the only tree on the land, Lily was sitting on the dirt floor. Around her, there were several sticks organized in a strange way. Richard got out of the vehicle and approached the low fence that delimited the property, trying to understand what the girl was doing. His eyes widened as he realized that Lily wasn't just playing. She was using the sticks to do complex mathematical calculations in the dirt. With precise movements, the girl scratched numbers on the ground and arranged them in operations that seemed very advanced for her age. 15 times 23, she murmured to herself, moving the sticks as if they were an abacus. 345. Richard was speechless. That 6-year-old child was solving 2-digit multiplications without any difficulty, using only sticks and the ground as tools. How did you learn to do that? He asked, unable to contain his curiosity. Lily looked up, startled to have been observed. When she recognized Richard, she stood up quickly, wiping her hands on the skirt of her dress. Sorry, sir, I wasn't doing anything wrong, she said, starting to gather the sticks. No, said Richard quickly. You didn't do anything wrong. In fact, what you were doing is amazing. Where did you learn math like that? Lily hesitated, looking towards the house to make sure that Rose wasn't around. My grandma doesn't like it when I play with numbers, she admitted in a low voice. Why not? She says it won't help me with anything, that a poor girl has to learn. Useful things, like washing clothes and cooking. Richard felt a pang of frustration. Lily clearly had an exceptional talent for mathematics, but was being discouraged from developing it. And how did you learn on your own? I listen when the kids at school talk about their lessons, explained Lily. I can't go to school because Grandma needs me to help with work, but sometimes I stand outside the window listening to the teacher. Teach. The revelation hit Richard like a punch to the gut. Lily was literally eavesdropping on classes through the window because she couldn't attend school regularly. Would you like to go to school every day? He asked carefully. Lily's eyes shone with an intense desire. More than anything in the world, she whispered, but Grandma says we don't have money for school supplies, and that she needs me to help in carry the heavy clothes. At that moment, Rose's voice echoed from inside the house. "Lily, where are you?" The girl quickly kicked the dirt to erase the numbers she had drawn and scattered the sticks. "I'm here, Grandma." Rose appeared at the door, wearing an apron stained with soap. When she saw Richard standing at the fence, her expression hardened immediately. "What are you doing here? Didn't I make it clear that we don't want your presence around here?" "Grandma Rose, I was just passing by and saw Lily doing something extraordinary," said Richard, trying to maintain a respectful tone. "She has an incredible talent for mathematics." "Mathematics doesn't fill stomachs or pay bills," replied Rose dryly. "Lily, come here. We have work to do." The girl reluctantly obeyed, but not before casting a sad look at the sticks scattered on the ground. Richard realized that she was being forced to abandon something she clearly loved. "Grandma Rose, if you'll allow me," insisted Richard, "I could pay for the school supplies for Lily. No strings attached, no commitment, just so she can develop her potential." "I already told you that we don't want your charity," Rose exploded. "And stop confusing the girl's head with these ideas of studying. The place for people like us is working, not dreaming." "But Grandma," said Lily timidly, "I like to study." "You like it because you don't know what real life is like," said Rose, her voice loaded with deep bitterness. "Dreams don't sustain anyone, my dear. Honest work does." Richard watched the interaction between grandmother and granddaughter with a heavy heart. He could see the frustration in Lily's eyes, the repressed desire to learn more, to explore her natural talent. And he could also see the pain in Rose, a woman who clearly was trying to protect her granddaughter from disappointments, even if it meant limiting her possibilities. "Can I make a proposal?" he said carefully. "How about if I offered you work? A well-paid job that would allow Lily to attend school regularly?" Rose stared at him suspiciously. "What kind of work?" "I have a large property on the outskirts of town. I need someone to take care of the house, wash clothes, do cleaning. It's honest work, and I would pay enough so that you could have a more comfortable life." "And what would be the catch?" asked Rose. "Men like you don't offer work to women like me without having ulterior motives." The accusation hurt Richard, mainly because he himself wasn't sure what exactly his motivations were. There was something about Lily that awakened in him a need for protection that he couldn't explain. "There's no catch," he said sincerely. "I just want to help a talented child have the opportunities she deserves." "Why?" insisted Rose. "Why do you care so much about a girl you barely know?" Richard was silent for a long moment. The question echoed his own questions of the last few days. Why had Lily stirred him so much? Why did he feel this urgent need to protect her and help her? "I don't know," he admitted finally. "Maybe because I recognize in her something that I lost a long time ago. Or maybe because I believe that every child deserves the chance to develop their talents." Rose studied his face for a few seconds, as if trying to detect lies or hidden intentions. Finally, she sighed. "I'll think about your proposal," she said. "But if I accept, it will be with conditions. Lily continues living with me. I set the work hours, and any sign that you're trying to take advantage of the situation, we leave immediately." "Agreed," agreed Richard quickly. "And one more thing," added Rose, her voice getting lower but no less firm. "Stop raising expectations in the girl about studying and having a different life. Life teaches that it's better not to dream too high so as not to be disappointed." Her words carried a weight of bitter experience that made Richard wonder what disappointments Rose had faced to become so distrustful of better opportunities. That night in his empty house, Richard reflected on the encounter. He had achieved a small victory by convincing Rose to consider his job offer, but he knew that gaining the woman's trust would be a long battle. Even more disturbing was the way Lily had reacted when he mentioned school and studies. The sparkle in her eyes had been so intense that it was painful to witness. How many other talented children were being deprived of education simply for lack of resources? As he prepared breakfast the next day, Richard made a decision. Regardless of whether Rose accepted his job offer or not, he would find a way to help. Lily developed her mathematical talent. The girl deserved to have the chance to dream big, even if it meant facing the resistance of a grandmother who had been hurt too much by life to believe in better possibilities. What he didn't imagine was that his decision to get involved in the lives of Lily and Rose would lead him to discover connections with his own past that would completely change his understanding about family, responsibility, and redemption. The following Sunday arrived loaded with tension. Richard decided that, regardless of Rose's answer about the job offer, he would attend Mass at St. Jude's Church. There was something that bothered him deeply about the treatment that Lily had received, and he needed to confront that injustice in some way. He arrived early and chose a pew in the middle of the nave, from where he could observe both the altar and the entrance. It didn't take long to see Lily timidly enter through the main door, wearing the same faded blue dress, but this time accompanied by Rose. The grandmother wore a simple black dress that had seen better days, but it was impeccably clean and ironed. Her grey hair was tied in a low bun, and she carried a small bag made of worn fabric. Mother and granddaughter quietly headed to one of the back pews, clearly trying to go unnoticed. Richard noticed how the other parishioners reacted to their presence. Some looked away, others whispered to each other, and a few offered polite but distant smiles. It was obvious that Rose and Lily occupied a social position that kept them on the margins of the community, even within the house of God. Father Michael stepped up to the pulpit with his usual expression of controlled seriousness. At 45 years old, he was a man who conveyed natural authority, but there was something in his eyes that suggested internal struggles that few people knew. "My brothers and sisters," he began, his voice echoing through the church, "today I want to talk about the true meaning of Christian charity." Richard leaned slightly forward, curious to see how the priest would approach the topic after the incident of the previous week. "Charity is not just giving money or food to the needy," continued Father Michael. "It is opening our hearts to recognize the inherent dignity of every human being, regardless of their social condition." The words sounded hollow coming from the man who had allowed Lily to be humiliated in his own church. Richard felt the irritation grow in his chest. Saint Francis of Assisi teaches us that we must serve the poor not out of pity, but out of recognition that they are our brothers and sisters in Christ, continued the priest. It was at this moment that Richard noticed something strange. Father Michael seemed to be avoiding looking directly at the back of the church, where Rose and Lily were sitting. It was as if he was uncomfortable with his own homily. When it came time for communion, Richard watched carefully. Rose remained seated, but gestured for Lily to stand up. The girl hesitated for a moment, clearly remembering what had happened the previous week. "Go, my dear," whispered Rose, giving her courage. "You have the same right as anyone here." Lily stood up and joined the line for communion. Richard noticed how she held her head up, despite the obvious anxiety in her movements. When it was her turn before the priest, she opened her mouth and extended her hands as she had been taught. Father Michael looked at her for a moment that seemed eternal. Then, in a voice low enough for only she to hear, he said, "The body of Christ." Lily received the host and returned to her place without any incident. But Richard had noticed the priest's hesitation, the way his hands trembled slightly when giving communion to the girl. After Mass, as the parishioners slowly dispersed through the church square, Richard approached Father Michael, who was talking with some parishioners near the entrance. "Father," he said, waiting for a pause in the conversation, "could I speak?" With you, in private? Father Michael looked at him with curiosity mixed with caution. Of course, my son. Let's go to my office. The parish office was a simple space, with walls lined with religious books and a dark wooden desk covered in papers. Father Michael gestured for Richard to sit in a chair in front of the desk. "How can I help you?" asked the priest, settling into his chair. "I want to talk about what happened here last week," said Richard directly. "With the girl, Lily." Father Michael's expression hardened slightly. "What specific aspect of the incident? The aspect in which a 6-year-old child was humiliated and expelled from the church for asking for a piece of bread. The janitor acted hastily," admitted the priest after a pause. "But we must understand that there are protocols to be followed." "Protocols," repeated Richard, his voice carrying disbelief. "We're talking about a hungry child asking for food in the house of God. We're talking about maintaining order and decorum during the celebration," replied Father Michael, but his voice sounded less convinced than his words. Richard studied the priest's face for a moment. There was something there beyond the official defensiveness, something that seemed almost like guilt. "Father, can I ask a personal question?" "You can try. Do you know Lily's family well? Rose?" A shadow passed over Father Michael's face. "I've known Grandma Rose for a few years. She's a regular parishioner." "A few years? Since when exactly?" "Since she arrived in town about 6 years ago," replied the priest, but there was a hesitation in his voice that didn't go unnoticed by Richard. "And the girl, have you known her since she was little?" "Lily arrived with her grandmother. She was just a baby at the time." Richard noticed that Father Michael was getting visibly uncomfortable with the questions. His hands played nervously. With a wooden crucifix on the desk, "Father, I'll be direct. I'm interested in helping Lily. She has an exceptional talent for mathematics, but she can't attend school regularly because she needs to help her grandmother work." "And what would be the nature of that help?" asked Father Michael, his voice gaining a tone of suspicion. "I offered Rose work on my property, a job that would allow Lily to attend school every day." "I see." The priest was silent for a few moments, clearly processing the information. "Richard, may I call you that?" "Of course." "Richard, you are a respected man in this community. Your family has deep roots here. But I must warn you to be careful about the expectations you create in people, in vulnerable situations." "What do you mean by that?" Father Michael got up and walked to the window that overlooked the church square. "Rose is a woman who has suffered a lot in her life. She has built high walls around herself and her granddaughter to protect herself from more disappointments." "Disappointments like what?" The priest hesitated again, as if he were debating internally how much he should reveal. "It's not my place to tell someone else's story," he said finally, "but I can say that Grandma Rose has reasons to distrust the generosity of men in positions of power, reasons based on past experiences. Reasons based on realities that you may not fully understand," said Father Michael, turning to face him. "Richard, your intentions may be genuine, but the situation is more complex than it seems." "Complex how?" The priest returned to his chair and leaned forward, his hands clasped on the desk. "There are things about Rose and Lily's arrival in this town that raise questions." "What kind of questions?" "Questions that may be better left in the past," said Father Michael firmly. "My advice is that, if you really want to help, proceed with extreme caution, and perhaps consider other ways to contribute to the community." Richard felt frustration growing inside him. "Father, with all due respect, I don't understand why a simple offer of work and education for a talented child is being treated as something suspicious." "Because not everything is as simple as it seems," replied the priest. "And because sometimes meddling with certain situations can bring to light things that are better left buried." The conversation had taken a turn that Richard didn't expect. What had started as a discussion about social justice had turned into something much more mysterious and personal. "Father, are you trying to tell me something specific?" Father Michael was silent for a long moment, his eyes fixed on the crucifix on the desk. When he finally spoke, his voice was loaded with a weight that Richard couldn't identify. "I'm trying to say that you may not be prepared for all the answers you're looking for, and that some doors, once opened, can no longer be closed." Father Michael's enigmatic words echoed in Richard's mind throughout the following week. Some doors, once opened, can no longer be closed. What exactly did the priest mean? And why did everyone seem to be hiding something about Rose and Lily? On Wednesday, his curiosity overcame his prudence. Richard decided to do some discreet investigations about the family. His first stop was the city's registry office, where he knew the clerk well, Sebastian, a man of 60 years who had worked there for decades. "Sebastian, I need some information," said Richard, entering the office. "Of course, Mr. Huntington. How can I help?" "Do you remember when a woman named Rose moved to town about 6 years ago? She came with a small child." Sebastian frowned, thoughtful. "Rose? Yes, I remember vaguely. An older woman with a baby. Why do you ask?" "Just curious. Do you remember if she registered any documents here? Birth certificate of the child, something like that?" "Let me check," said Sebastian, heading to the files. After a few minutes of searching, he returned with a confused expression. "That's strange. I can't find any birth registration for any child under the name of Rose in the last 6 years. "Are you sure?" "Absolutely. And look, I also don't find any documents of change of address or transfer of records from another city. It's as if she simply appeared here without leaving official traces." The information left Richard even more intrigued. How was it possible that Rose and Lily didn't have proper documentation? His next stop was the house of Mrs. Eleanor, an 80-year-old lady who was the living memory of Oak Creek. If anyone knew about Rose's arrival in town, it would be her. "Mrs. Eleanor, good morning," greeted Richard, being received on the porch of the simple house where the elderly woman lived. "Richard, my dear, what a surprise. Sit down, I'll get some coffee." After the usual greetings, Richard steered the conversation. "Mrs. Eleanor, do you remember when Grandma Rose arrived in town? The one who lives in the yellow house by the creek?" Mrs. Eleanor's eyes became distant, as if she were rummaging through old memories. "Ah, yes. It was on a night of heavy rain. I remember well. She appeared at my door completely soaked, carrying a baby in her arms." "At your door?" "Yes, she was desperate, begging for shelter for the night. She said she had come from far away and had nowhere to go. The baby was sick, with a high fever, and you helped her." "Of course I did. I gave the child a bath, prepared hot tea for both of them." Rose was in shock, spoke little, always looking over her shoulder as if she were running away from something. "Running away?" Mrs. Eleanor nodded gravely. "I have no doubts that woman was very afraid of something, or someone." "Did she say where she came from?" "That she only said that she'd lost everything and needed to start a new life. She never talked about the child's father, about family. Nothing. It was as if she wanted to completely forget the past." "And how did she get the house where she lives now?" "Ah, I arranged that for her," said Mrs. Eleanor with pride. "The house had been empty for years. It belonged to old Anthony, who had died. I talked to the heirs, and they agreed to rent it to her cheaply, as long as she took care of the place." "Very generous of you." "That woman needed a new chance," said Mrs. Eleanor, her voice getting lower. "And the baby, oh my God, she was so tiny, so fragile. I couldn't leave them on the street." Did you notice anything else about Rose? Any detail that you found strange? Mrs. Eleanor hesitated for a moment. Well, there was one thing. She had an ugly scar on her arm. It looked like a burn. And when I asked about it, she got very nervous, quickly changed the subject. Burn? Yes. And whenever she heard the sound of a car stopping on the street, especially at night, she got terrified. She ran to the window as if she expected someone to come after her. Mrs. Eleanor's information painted a very different picture of Rose's arrival in town. It wasn't simply a poor woman looking for a better life. It was someone running away from something terrible, carrying deep secrets and traumas. Mrs. Eleanor, do you have any idea where she might have come from? I never managed to find out, but once, when she was still recovering here at home, I heard her talking in her sleep. She mentioned a name. Huntington. Richard's blood ran cold. Huntington? Are you sure? Yes, she repeated it several times. The Huntingtons will find me. I can't let the Huntingtons find out. It sounded like a terrible nightmare. The revelation hit Richard like a lightning bolt. Rose had arrived in town fleeing from someone in the Huntington family. But who and why? And how did this relate to the reaction she had had when she learned his last name? Mrs. Eleanor, did you ever mention this to anyone? Only to Father Michael when he came to visit Rose a few days after she arrived. I thought that as a priest he could help her overcome the traumas of the past. And what did the priest say? He got very serious, asked me not to comment to anyone else about her nightmares. He said that some people need time to heal old wounds, and that it would be better not to ask questions. Now everything made sense. Father Michael knew from the beginning about the connection between Rose and the Huntington family. That's why his reaction when Richard had mentioned wanting to help Lily. That's why the critical warnings about doors that shouldn't be opened. Mrs. Eleanor, one more question. Do you remember the baby's appearance when they arrived? Anything specific about the child? She was a beautiful girl with big dark eyes. Even sick, you could see that she would be a special child. She had dark curly hair and a birthmark on her left wrist in the shape of a crescent moon. Birthmark in the shape of a crescent moon. Yes, very small. Rose always covered it with long sleeves, as if she were ashamed, but I saw it when I gave the baby a bath. Richard thanked Mrs. Eleanor and left there with his mind racing. All the pieces were beginning to fit together, but they formed a terrible puzzle. Rose had arrived in town, fleeing from someone in the Huntington family, carrying a baby who wasn't necessarily her biological daughter, and both she and Father Michael were keeping secrets about this story. That afternoon, he made a decision that would change everything. He needed to see Lily again. He needed to verify if she really had that birthmark that Mrs. Eleanor had mentioned. If she did, that could be the key to unraveling the whole truth. He headed to the yellow house, but this time he didn't intend to talk to Rose. He waited in his pickup truck until he saw the woman leave for work, carrying her bundle of clothes to wash. He knew that Lily used to be alone at home for a few hours in the afternoon. When he was sure that Rose had left, he knocked gently on the door. Lily appeared at the window first, recognized Richard, and opened the door timidly. "Hi, Mr. Richard Huntington," she said, using his full name for the first time. "Hi, Lily. Is your grandmother home?" "No, she went to work at Mrs. Mercedes's house, but she told me not to open the door to strangers." "You don't consider me a stranger, do you?" Lily smiled slightly. "No, you're the man who likes math like me." "Exactly. Can I come in just for a minute? I wanted to show you something." The girl hesitated, but her natural curiosity overcame her caution. She opened the door, and Richard entered the simple but clean house. The environment was Spartan, but there were signs of Rose's affection for Lily, drawings of the girl pasted on the wall, a handmade rag doll on the table. "Lily, can I ask you a strange question?" "You can." Do you have any special marks on your body? A mole or birthmark? The girl automatically extended her left arm and pulled up the sleeve of her blouse, revealing a small dark mark on her wrist, exactly in the shape of a crescent moon. Richard felt the air escape from his lungs. There was the confirmation he feared to find. Lily had the same mark that Mrs. Eleanor had described. But what did it mean? Who was this child really, and what terrible secret was Rose hiding? "It's pretty, isn't it?" said Lily, admiring her own mark. "Grandma always says it's special, that it means I'm protected by God." "Your grandmother is right," said Richard, struggling to keep his voice stable. "It's very special indeed." At that moment he heard footsteps approaching the house. Rose had returned earlier than expected. Richard felt the panic rise in his throat when he realized that he was about to be discovered doing exactly what Rose feared most, questioning Lily alone. The door of the house opened forcefully, and Rose entered with eyes blazing with fury. Seeing Richard inside her house, talking alone with Lily, she dropped the bundle of clothes on the floor and advanced towards him like a beast protecting her cub. "What are you doing here?" she shouted, positioning herself between Richard and Lily. "How dare you enter my house without permission?" "Grandma Rose, I can explain," began Richard, but was interrupted. "Explain what? That you're here interrogating my granddaughter while I'm not around? That you're trying to find out things that are none of your business?" Lily cowered behind her grandmother, scared by the intensity of the discussion. "Grandma, he just wanted to see my special mark," she said innocently. Rose's face paled instantly. Her hands trembled as she pulled Lily close to her. "What mark? What are you talking about?" "The moon mark on my wrist," replied Lily, confused by her grandmother's reaction. "Mr. Richard Huntington said it was pretty." Rose looked at Richard with an expression that mixed absolute terror and murderous rage. "Get out of here," she whispered, her voice loaded with a dangerous threat. "Get out of here now before I call someone." "Grandma Rose, I need to talk to you," said Richard, trying to keep calm. "There are things that need to be clarified." "There's nothing to clarify," she exploded. "Lily, go to your room now." "But Grandma—" "Now!" shouted Rose, and the girl ran to the back of the house, tears starting to stream down her face. When they were alone, Rose approached Richard with slow and calculated steps. "I should have trusted my instincts from day one," she said, her voice low but full of venom. "Huntington. Of course it had to be a Huntington. Grandma Rose, I don't know what you think is happening, but I know exactly what's happening." She interrupted. "You found us. After 6 years, you finally found us." "Who found us? What are you talking about?" Rose laughed bitterly. "Don't play innocent with me. I know very well what the Huntington family is capable of doing. I know how you treat people like me and how you destroy lives without batting an eye. I don't understand." "You do understand," she shouted. "That's why you were interested in Lily from day one. That's why all this charade of wanting to help. You know who she is." Richard felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. "Who she is? Rhodes, for the love of God, explain to me once and for all who Lily is." The question seemed to hit Rose like a slap. She stared at him for a long moment, as if she were trying to decipher whether he was faking or really didn't know. You really don't know," she murmured, her voice losing some of its aggressiveness. "I don't know anything. I only know that a 6-year-old child has exceptional talent for mathematics and is being deprived of education. I only know that you arrived here fleeing from something related to my family, but I have no idea what." Rose staggered back, leaning against the wall. All the color had drained from her face. "My God," she whispered, "you weren't sent by them. You really don't know." "Know what?" insisted Richard, his frustration reaching the limit. Rose slid down the wall until she was sitting on the floor, as if her legs could no longer support her. "Lily isn't my granddaughter," she said finally, her voice barely a thread. "What do you mean?" "I found her 6 years ago. I found her abandoned on a terrible night in a house that was on fire." Richard felt the world spinning around him. House on fire? It was a house on the outskirts of Syracuse. I worked as a housekeeper for a wealthy family there. On the night of the fire, I was coming back late from work when I saw the flames. I ran to help, but when I got there, the house was almost completely destroyed. And Lily, she was in a room in the back, in a crib. She was only a few months old. She was crying desperately, but miraculously unharmed. The fire hadn't reached that room yet. Rose paused, wiping away the tears that had begun to stream down. Her face. "I looked for the parents, I shouted, I tried to enter other rooms, but the fire was too strong. I couldn't find anyone alive." "And what did you do?" "I picked up the baby and got out of there. I waited for the firefighters to arrive. I waited for the police. But when they told me that there were no adult survivors and that they were going to take the child to an orphanage," her voice faltered, "you ran away with her." "I couldn't leave her. She was so small, so helpless. And I knew what orphanages were like. I knew she wouldn't have any chance there." Richard sat heavily in a chair, trying to process the information. "But why did you come to Oak Creek? Why run?" "Because I found out who Lily's parents were," said Rose, her voice loaded with an old pain. "The house that caught fire belonged to a young couple, Robert Huntington and his wife Marina." The name hit Richard like a lightning bolt. Robert Huntington, his younger brother, who had cut off relations with the family after a terrible argument about the inheritance of their parents. Robert, who had left home at 20 and never returned. Robert, whom Richard hadn't seen in over 10 years. "Robert was my brother," he whispered. "I know," said Rose. "That's why I ran. Because I knew that if the Huntington family found out about Lily, they would try to take her away from me. You are powerful people, with lawyers and influence. I am just a housekeeper with no family. But why didn't you contact us? Why didn't you tell us about the child?" Rose's face hardened again. "Because I worked for years for wealthy families. I saw how they treat the poor, how they discard people like objects when they no longer need them. And mainly," she paused, taking a deep breath, "mainly because Robert told me things about your family that made me afraid." "What things?" "He was very afraid of you finding out where he lived. He said that your father was a cruel man, that your family destroyed anyone who opposed them, that if they knew he had a daughter, they would use the child to control him." Richard closed his eyes, remembering the authoritarian and manipulative father he had been. Rose's words echoed painfully with his own childhood memories. "Robert was right about our father," he admitted, "but our father has been dead for 5 years, and I'm not like him." "How could I know that?" asked Rose. "All I knew was that Lily was the daughter of a Huntington, and that if you found out, I would lose the only family I had left." "The only family?" "I lost my own children young, Mr. Richard Huntington. A car accident took my 2 boys when they were 8 and 10 years old. My husband couldn't bear the pain and left shortly after. Lily gave me back the will to live." Rose's confession explained so much about her protective and distrustful nature. She had lost everything once and was determined not to lose again. "So Lily is my niece," said Richard, still processing the reality. "She's your niece. And my daughter at heart, the child I saved from the flames and who saved me from the darkness." At that moment, a small and frightened voice came from the hallway. "Grandma, what's happening? Why are you crying?" Lily appeared in the doorway, her big eyes full of confusion and fear. She didn't understand why the 2 adults were in a state of anguish, but she could feel that something fundamental had changed. Richard looked at the girl, his niece, and saw in her traits that he now recognized. The bright intelligence in her eyes was the same as Robert's as a child. The gentle stubbornness was a characteristic of the Huntington family. The talent for mathematics had passed from generation to generation. "Grandma," repeated Lily, approaching Rose. "Everything is fine, my dear," said Rose, hugging the girl. "We were just talking about adult things." But as she spoke to Lily, Rose looked at Richard with a silent question in her eyes. What would happen now? Now that he knew the truth, would he try to take Lily away from her? Or would there be a way to protect the family that they had built together? Richard understood the fear in Rose's eyes, and for the first time since he had discovered the truth, he knew exactly what he needed to do. The heavy silence that settled in the small room was broken only by the sound of Rose's gasping breath and Lily's low sobs, who still didn't fully understand what was happening, but felt the emotional weight of the moment. Richard knelt before Lily, his eyes at her height. "Lily, can I tell you a story?" The girl nodded timidly, wiping away her tears with the back of her hand. "A long time ago, I had a younger brother. His name was Robert, and he was very similar to you. He loved numbers, he was curious about everything, and he had intelligent eyes like yours." "Where is he now?" asked Lily innocently. He went away from this world, along with his wife, shortly after you were born." Rose watched the conversation with extreme tension, ready to intervene at the slightest sign that Richard might disturb Lily. "But before he left," continued Richard, "Robert and Marina had a daughter, a beautiful, intelligent, and special girl." Lily's eyes widened slowly, as if a gradual understanding was forming in her childish mind. Was it me?" "It was you," confirmed Richard softly. "You are my niece, Lily, daughter of my brother Robert." The girl looked between Richard and Rose, her expression going through several emotions: confusion, surprise, and finally, a deep concern. "Does that mean Grandma isn't my grandma anymore?" she asked, her voice trembling. "No," said Rose immediately, pulling Lily into a tight hug. "I will always be your grandma, my dear. Nothing will change that." "She's right," agreed Richard. "Rose will always be your grandmother. She took care of you, protected you, loved you. That's what makes a real family." Lily seemed to calm down a little, but there was still doubt in her eyes. "And you? What's going to happen now?" It was the question that Rose most feared to hear. She stared at Richard with a mixture of defiance and silent pleading. "Now," said Richard carefully, "I would very much like to be a part of both of your lives, as an uncle and as family. But I don't want to leave my house," said Lily quickly. "I don't want to leave Grandma." "And you won't leave," assured Richard. "I would never ask that of you." Rose studied Richard's face intensely, looking for signs of lies or manipulation. "What do you mean?" she asked cautiously. "I mean that I would like to help both of you, but respecting the family you have already built. Lily can continue living here with you. But maybe we can find a way for her to have the educational opportunities she deserves." "And what would be the price of this help?" asked Rose, her distrust still evident. "There is no price," replied Richard, "just the chance to get to know my niece better and to try to make up for years of absence." "Absence that wasn't even your fault," murmured Rose, clearly struggling internally between relief and caution. "Maybe not, but I still feel responsible. Robert cut off relations with us because of our father. If I had been more courageous, if I had looked for him after our father died, maybe nothing would have changed," interrupted Rose. "The fire wasn't anyone's fault. It was a terrible accident." "Are you sure about that?" Richard's question seemed to awaken something in Rose. She hesitated, as if she were recalling details that she had tried to forget. At the time, and thought it was strange," she admitted slowly. "Robert was very nervous in the weeks before the fire. He said he was being followed, that someone had found out where he lived. Followed by whom? He never said clearly, but he mentioned something about debts and about dangerous people who wanted something from him." Richard frowned. "What? A kind of debts? I don't know. Marina always sent me to another room when they argued about it, but I heard fragments, something about money that Robert should have had, about an inheritance that he supposedly had hidden." "Inheritance?" "From the Huntington family. It seems that there were people who believed that Robert had fled with part of the family inheritance." The revelation hit Richard like a punch to the stomach. After his father's death, he had discovered several irregularities in the finances of the family business. Money that had disappeared, questionable investments, accounts in banks he didn't know. At the time, he had assumed that they were the result of his father's poorly managed business. But now... "Rose, do you think the fire may not have been accidental?" "I don't know," she said, visibly disturbed. "At the time, the firefighters said it was a short circuit, but there were signs, things that bothered me." "What signs?" "The fire started in several points of the house at the same time, and there was a strange smell. It wasn't just smoke from burning wood. It seemed like fuel." Lily, who had been quiet throughout the conversation, suddenly said, "Grandma, are you talking about the house where I was born?" Rose and Richard looked at each other, realizing that the girl was absorbing information that might be too heavy for her. "Yes, my dear," said Rose gently, "but that's all in the past. The important thing is that you are safe now." "And my parents, did they die trying to save me?" The question broke the hearts of both adults. Richard sat next to Lily. "Your parents loved you very much," he said, "and I'm sure they did everything they could to protect you. The fact that you survived is proof of that. But I don't remember them," said Lily sadly. "You were very little," explained Rose, "but they live in you, in your intelligence, in your kindness, in your courage. And now you have Grandma Rose, who has taken care of you all these years," added Richard, "and you have me too if you want." Lily looked at him with curiosity. "As an uncle?" "As an uncle," confirmed Richard. "Someone who will be here whenever you need me." At that moment, Rose made a decision that surprised even herself. "Mr. Richard Huntington," she said formally, "I would like to accept your job offer." "Are you sure?" "I am. Lily deserves to have the chance to study, and maybe it's time to stop running from the past. But with conditions," she added quickly. "Lily continues living with me. I set the rules about how she will be raised, and if at any moment I feel that the situation is not good for her, we leave immediately." "I agree with all the conditions," said Richard without hesitating. "And one more thing," said Rose, her voice getting firmer. "I want you to investigate properly about the fire. If Robert really was in danger, if the fire wasn't accidental, Lily needs to know the truth when she grows up." "I'll investigate," promised Richard, "but that may bring difficult revelations. The truth is always better than the lie, no matter how painful it may be." Lily, observing the serious conversation between the two most important adults in her life, asked a question that revealed her precocious maturity. "If they find out that bad people hurt my parents, those people may want to hurt me too." The silence that followed was terrifying. Both Rose and Richard realized that by agreeing to investigate the past, they might be putting Lily in danger. "We won't let anyone hurt you," said Richard firmly. "Never." "Promise?" asked Lily. "I promise," replied Richard, looking into the girl's eyes, "and I always keep my promises." But as he made that promise, Richard couldn't help but wonder if he would be able to fulfill it. If Robert had really been murdered because of some secret related to the family inheritance, who guaranteed that those responsible wouldn't come after Lily when they found out she was alive? And what if Father Michael knew more about the situation than he had revealed? Why had he made so many warnings about doors that shouldn't be opened? That night, after Rose and Lily had retired, Richard remained awake, planning his next steps. He needed to find out the truth about the deaths of Robert and Marina, but he also needed to protect Lily, and something told him that these two needs could conflict in ways that he couldn't yet imagine. 3 weeks had passed since the revelation. That had changed everything. Rose had accepted the job on Richard's property, and a new routine was being established. Every morning, Lily accompanied her grandmother to the big house on the outskirts of town, where she spent the day studying with books that Richard had bought especially for her, while Rose took care of the cleaning and organization. The girl was flourishing in a way that impressed both adults. Her hunger for knowledge was insatiable, and she devoured each new mathematical concept with an ease that bordered on the supernatural. Richard had hired a private tutor, Mrs. Evans, who came 3 times a week to give formal lessons. "I've never seen a child learn so fast," commented Mrs. Evans one Thursday afternoon, after a particularly productive lesson. "Lily is already solving problems that I normally only teach to children of 10 years old." Richard smiled, watching his niece through the window pane. She was in the garden, using sticks to draw geometric figures in the dirt, completely absorbed in her world of numbers and shapes. "She has a special gift," he agreed, "just like my brother Robert did." But not everything was going as planned. As the weeks passed, Richard noticed worrying signs in Rose. The woman who had always been strong and determined was beginning to show moments of confusion and forgetfulness. The previous week, she had gotten lost coming back from the grocery store, a route she had known for 6 years. The next day, she forgot where she had put the money that Richard had paid her for her work, finding it hours later inside the refrigerator. Small incidents that in isolation could be attributed to fatigue, but that together formed an alarming pattern. "Grandma, are you okay?" asked Lily one morning when she found Rose in the kitchen, looking confused at a coffee pot as if she didn't know what to do with it. "Of course I am, my dear," Rose replied quickly, but Richard noticed the tremor in her voice. "I was just thinking about other things." It was a Saturday morning when the first really serious incident happened. Richard was in his office, working with some company papers, when he heard screams coming from the garden. He ran to the window and saw Lily crying desperately, pointing to the gate of the property. He ran outside and found the girl in a state of total panic. "Where's your grandmother?" he asked, kneeling next to her. She said she was going to pick some flowers over there at the fence and suddenly went out through the gate," sobbed Lily. "I ran after her, but when I got there she was gone." Richard felt his blood run cold. The property was in a rural area, surrounded by deserted roads and dense woods. If Rose was having an episode of mental confusion and had gotten lost, how long ago did this happen? "I don't know, maybe half an hour." Richard picked Lily up and ran to his pickup truck. They needed to find Rose before something terrible happened. They drove along the nearby roads with Lily's eyes glued to the windows, looking for any sign of her grandmother. It was after almost an hour of searching that they found her, sitting on the side of a secondary road, completely lost and disoriented. "Grandma!" shouted Lily, jumping out of the pickup truck before Richard had even parked it completely. Rose looked up when she heard her granddaughter's voice, and for a moment seemed not to recognize her. Then gradually the confusion on her face gave way to recognition and relief. "Lily, my dear, what are you doing here?" "You got lost, Grandma. You left Uncle Richard Huntington's house and couldn't find your way back." Rose looked around as if she was seeing the place for the first time. I was looking for something," she murmured, "but I can't remember what." Richard approached carefully. "Grandma Rose, let's go home. You must be tired." On the way back, Lily held her grandmother's hand tightly, as if she feared that she might disappear again. Rose remained quiet, looking out the window with a distant expression. That night, after Lily had fallen asleep, Richard and Rose had a difficult conversation. "Something is happening to me," admitted Rose, her voice loaded with fear. "Sometimes I forget where I am or what I was doing. It's like my mind gets blurry." "How long has this been happening?" "A few months. At first I thought it was just tiredness, but it's been getting worse." Richard took a deep breath. "Rose, I think we need to see a doctor. Get some tests done." "And if it's something serious?" she asked, tears starting to stream down her face. "What's going to happen to Lily?" "We'll take care of all of this together," promised Richard. "First, let's find out what's happening. Then, we'll do what's best for you and for Lily." "She can't find out," said Rose urgently. "I don't want her to worry. She's already gone through so much suffering in her life. She'll need to know eventually. But we'll tell her when it's the right time, in the right way." The following week, Richard took Rose to a neurologist in Albany. The tests confirmed his worst fears. Rose was in the initial stages of a degenerative disease that would progressively affect her memory and cognitive ability. "It's a condition that progresses slowly," explained Dr. Harris, a middle-aged man, with a compassionate expression. "She can still have a good quality of life for a few years, but she will need increasing care as the disease progresses." "How long?" asked Richard directly. "Difficult to say with precision. It could be 2 years. It could be 5. It depends on how she responds to the treatment and on individual factors." In the car, returning to Oak Creek, Rose was silent for long minutes. Finally, she spoke. "I need to make sure that Lily will be safe." "She will be. I promise." "It's not just about having a roof and food," said Rose, turning to face him. "It's about love, about emotional security. Lily has already lost her parents. I can't let her feel abandoned again." "She won't feel abandoned. We will take care of her together for as long as possible. And when you can't anymore, I will be here." "Do you promise that you won't try to change who she is? That you won't try to turn her into a small version of the Huntingtons?" The question touched a deep wound in Richard. "I promise that I will let her be exactly who she wants to be." That night, back at the Yellow House, something unexpected happened. Lily, who had spent the day at school for the first time in months, Richard had managed to officially enroll her, arrived home with disturbing news. "Uncle Richard Huntington," she said, running to him as soon as she entered through the door. "A strange lady was at school today asking about me." Richard and Rose exchanged alarmed glances. "What kind of questions?" he asked, trying to keep calm. "The principal said she wanted to know about my family, where I came from, who took care of me. The teacher thought it was strange and sent her away." "What did this lady look like?" "Tall, with black hair and sunglasses. She had a scar here," said Lily, pointing to the right side of her face. "And she spoke in a weird way, as if she were hiding something." Rose paled. "My God," she whispered. "They found out where we are." "Who found out?" asked Richard. But the expression on Rose's face already gave him the answer. "The people that Robert was trying to avoid. The people who may have caused the fire." Lily looked between the two adults, realizing the tension that had settled in the room. "Am I in danger?" she asked with a maturity that was frightening for her age. Richard knelt before her, holding her small hands. "I won't let anything happen to you," he said, "but maybe it's time for us to be more careful." That night, while Lily slept, Richard made a decision that would change everything again. He called a private investigator in Albany, a man recommended by Robert years ago, ironically. "I need to investigate a fire that happened 6 years ago in Syracuse," he said, "and find out who may be looking for a child who survived that fire." "It's going to be dangerous to mess with this after so long," warned the detective. "More dangerous than leaving a helpless child in the hands of people who may have killed her parents. Valid point. I'll start the investigations tomorrow. As he ended the call, Richard looked out the window of the yellow house where two lights were still on. One in Rose's room, who was probably awake, worrying about the future, and another in Lily's room, who had left a nightlight on because she was still afraid of the dark. Two women who depended on him now, one who was losing the ability to protect the other, and a child who might be in the sights of dangerous people, and he in the middle, trying to figure out how to protect both while unraveling secrets that could destroy everything they had built together. 2 weeks after the incident at the school, the private investigator Carl Mendoza called Richard with information that would make his blood run cold. It was a Tuesday morning, and Richard was on his property watching Lily play in the garden, while Rose, who had had a particularly confused morning, rested in the shade. "Mr. Richard Huntington," said Carl over the phone, his voice loaded with urgency. "I need to see you today. What I discovered about the fire is much worse than we imagined." "Can you talk over the phone?" "Definitely not. Meet me at the Central Cafe in Oak Creek at 3 in the afternoon, and come alone." Carl's tone left Richard extremely uneasy. He asked Rose to keep an eye on Lily and headed to town, his heart beating fast in his chest. Carl was sitting at a table in the back of the cafe, wearing sunglasses despite the indoor environment. He was a thin man of 50 years, with grey hair and a scar on his chin that spoke of a hard life. "Robert didn't die in an accident," said Carl without preamble as soon as Richard sat down. "It was murder, premeditated and carefully planned." "How are you sure?" Carl slid a folder across the table. "I managed to access the original records of the investigation, records that were subsequently buried by people with a lot of influence." Richard opened the folder and found photographs of the fire scene, technical reports and witness statements. The images were disturbing. The house had been completely destroyed, but the burn patterns clearly indicated the use of accelerant in multiple points. "The firefighters knew it was arson from day one," continued Carl, "but someone with a lot of power made them change the report to accidental." "Who?" "That's where it gets interesting," said Carl, his voice lowering even more. "I found records that Robert was being blackmailed for months before the fire." "Blackmailed for what?" "For something he discovered about the family business. It seems that your father was involved in money laundering through the coffee company. Robert found evidence and threatened to expose everything." Richard felt the world spinning around him. "My father was a criminal?" "He was, and he had powerful partners who couldn't allow Robert to talk. When the threats didn't work, they resorted to more drastic methods." "And Lily? Do they know she survived?" Carl hesitated. "That's the most worrying part. I found evidence that for 6 years someone has been looking for the child. The woman who appeared at the school wasn't the first. There have been discreet investigations in several cities." "My God." "And there's more," said Carl, removing another document from the folder. "Robert left something hidden. A letter and evidence that proves everything about your father's criminal activities. If that information comes to light, it could destroy several very powerful people. Where is it hidden? That's the problem." "The only clue is this," said Carl, showing a photograph of a paper with Robert's handwriting. On it was written, "Where the crescent moon protects the little dreams." Richard studied the phrase, trying to find meaning in it. Crescent moon. Does it make any sense to you? Suddenly, a realization hit Richard like a lightning bolt. Lily's birthmark. Rose always said that the crescent moon-shaped mark meant protection, and little dreams could refer to the drawings that Lily made with sticks. "I know where it might be," he said, "but that means Lily is in even greater danger than we thought." "Why?" "Because if Robert's killers find out that she has the key to find the evidence—" Carl nodded gravely. "They'll do anything to silence her permanently." Richard left the cafe with his mind racing. He needed to protect Lily, but he also needed to find the evidence that Robert had hidden. If he managed to expose the real criminals, perhaps he could guarantee his niece's safety once and for all. When he arrived back at the property, he found a scene that terrified him. Rose was sitting in the garden, crying silently, while Lily was crouched next to her, trying to console her. "What happened?" he asked, running towards the two. "Grandma, I can't remember my name," said Lily, her own tears streaming down. "She was looking at me like I was a stranger." Richard knelt next to Rose. "Grandma Rose, how are you feeling?" Rose looked up, and for a moment seemed not to recognize him either. Then gradually the confusion gave way to recognition. "Richard? What? Where are we?" "We're on my property. You were taking care of Lily while I was out." "Lily?" Rose looked at the girl as if she were seeing her for the first time. "Who is Lily?" Richard's heart broke to see the terror in Lily's eyes. The girl was witnessing the grandmother she loved gradually disappear, and there was nothing he could do to prevent it. "Grandma, it's me, your little granddaughter," said Lily softly, taking Rose's hand. "You told me stories about princes and princesses. You taught me how to braid my hair." For a few moments, Rose just looked at Lily. Then something changed in her face. "My little one, my dear girl," she murmured, hugging Lily tightly. "I'm sorry, my dear. Sometimes I get confused." That night, after he managed to put both Rose and Lily to sleep, Richard went to the backyard of the yellow house with a flashlight. He needed to find Robert's hiding place before it was too late. He carefully examined the area where Lily used to draw with sticks, where the crescent moon protects the little dreams. If his interpretation was correct, Robert had hidden something related to Lily's birthmark and the dreams of a child. It was then that he noticed something that had always gone unnoticed. The tree under which Lily played had a branch grown in a strange way, bent exactly in the shape of a crescent moon, and under it, protected by the roots, there was a small elevation in the ground that seemed artificial. He began to dig carefully, and after a few minutes, his shovel hit something solid. It was a metal box, protected against moisture and weather. Inside the box, he found documents that proved everything Carl had discovered. False contracts, records of illegal transactions, names of corrupt politicians and businessmen involved in the money laundering scheme. And in the bottom, a letter addressed to whoever finds this. Robert's letter was a complete account of how he had discovered his father's criminal activities, how he had been threatened, and how he feared for his life and for the life of his family. On the last page, a revelation that made Richard stagger. The masterminds of the murder were not just external criminals. They included people from the very community of Oak Creek. "If something happens to me," Robert had written, "protect my daughter. She is innocent of all the sins of the Huntington family. And if one day she is in danger, seek out Father Michael. He knows the whole truth and can help." Father Michael, the man who had made so many critical warnings, who had demonstrated knowledge about Rose's arrival in town. He knew about Robert's murder from the beginning. Richard put away the documents and returned home, his mind working furiously. Now he had enough evidence to expose all the culprits, but he knew that this would put Lily in mortal danger. The killers would do anything to prevent this information from coming to light. The next morning, he made a discovery that made everything even more urgent. Upon checking the house, he realized that someone had tried to break into the back door during the night. Tool marks on the jamb made it clear that only the arrival of dawn had prevented the invasion. They were being watched, and time was running out. "Lily," he said during breakfast, trying to keep his voice calm, "how about we go on a trip? Visit a different city for a few days. Why? She asked, always perceptive. Because I think it would be good for Grandma Rose to rest in a different place, and for you to see new places. But Lily was no longer the innocent child she had been months ago. The recent events had prematurely matured her perception. "It's because of the strange lady at school, isn't it?" she asked directly. "We're running away from something." Richard realized that he could no longer protect Lily from the truth through lies. She deserved to know at least part of what was happening. "Yes," he admitted, "there are people who may want to hurt us, and I need to keep you safe while I resolve this situation." "And Grandma, is she coming with us?" Richard looked at Rose, who was sitting at the table, looking confused at a cup of coffee, as if she didn't know what to do with it. The trip could be very stressful for her deteriorating mental state. "Of course she's coming," he said finally. "The three of us stay together." But as he made that promise, Richard didn't know if he would be able to fulfill it. The enemies were closing in, Rose was becoming increasingly confused, and he still needed to find a way to use Robert's evidence without putting Lily in the line of fire. And the most terrifying truth, from the documents he had found, he discovered that the leader of the group that had killed Robert was still alive, still powerful, and most likely already knew that he had found the evidence. On the morning following the discovery of the evidence, Richard made a courageous decision. Before fleeing with Lily and Rose, he needed to confront Father Michael and find out exactly what the religious man knew about the whole situation. If Robert had left instructions to seek out the priest in case of danger, there was a reason for it. He arrived at the church in the early afternoon, when he knew that Father Michael would be alone preparing the evening mass. He found him at the altar, organizing the sacred objects with meticulous and thoughtful movements. "Father," said Richard, his voice echoing through the empty nave. Father Michael turned around, and something in Richard's expression caused his hands to stop in the air. "Richard, you seem disturbed. I found the evidence that Robert hid." The silence that followed was deafening. Father Michael carefully placed the chalice on the altar and descended the steps slowly. "So the time has come," he said, his voice loaded with a weight that seemed accumulated for years. "I knew this day would come." "You knew about the murder from the beginning?" "I knew," admitted Father Michael, gesturing for them to sit on the first pew. "Robert came to me 3 days before he died. He was terrified. He said he had discovered terrible things about the family business and that his life was in danger." "And you didn't do anything?" "I did what I could. I offered to hide him here in the church to help him get out of town, but he refused. He said he couldn't abandon Marina and the baby." "Why didn't you go to the police?" Father Michael laughed bitterly. "Because half of the local police were in the pocket of the same men who were threatening Robert. Your father had corrupted a lot of people in Oak Creek over the years." The revelation hit Richard like a punch. "My father corrupted the local police?" "Your father was a powerful and unscrupulous man. He used the coffee company as a front to launder money from various illicit activities. When Robert discovered and threatened to expose everything, he was killed," completed Richard, "along with Marina, and they would have killed the baby too if Rose hadn't saved her. You knew that Rose had saved Lily. I knew when she arrived in town. I recognized the description of the baby that Robert had shown me in photographs. But Rose was so scared, so determined to protect the child, that I decided to help her keep the secret. That's why you gave me so many warnings when I said I wanted to help Lily." "Exactly. I feared that your presence would arouse the attention of the wrong people, and it seems that I was right." Richard told about the strange woman at the school, and about the evidence that they were being watched. Father Michael was visibly shaken. "They found out where you are," he said. "That means the danger is immediate." "Who are they? Who killed Robert?" Father Michael hesitated for a long moment. The main mastermind is Colonel Davenport, a powerful farmer in the region. He was your father's main partner in the illegal business. Colonel Davenport? Richard knew the name. He was a respected man in the community, owner of several farms, and with considerable political influence. He has contacts throughout the region, politicians, police officers, judges. If he's decided that you are a threat, he won't stop until he eliminates you. And the evidence that Robert left, is it enough to destroy him? It is, but only if it reaches the right people, and only if you survive long enough to deliver it. At that moment, Richard's cell phone rang. It was Rose, and her voice was loaded with panic. "Richard, you need to come back now. There are men prowling around the house. Lily is hidden in the basement, but they are looking for a way to get in." Richard hung up and stood up immediately. "They arrived at the house. I need to go." "Wait," said Father Michael, grabbing his arm. "If you go alone, you'll go straight into a trap. I can't leave Lily there. And I won't let you. I'm going with you." "Father, this is too dangerous. Richard, 6 years ago I failed to protect this family. I won't fail again." The two men left the church running. Father Michael insisted on taking his own car, claiming that his presence could serve as protection, since attacking a priest would cause too much uproar in the community. On the way, he explained a plan that he had conceived years ago in case this day arrived. "There's a network of people in the region who know the truth about your father and Colonel Davenport, people who have been harmed by them over the years. If we can get to them with the evidence, we can expose everything at once." Who are these people? Journalists, honest prosecutors, social activists, people that your father and Davenport never managed to completely buy or intimidate. When they arrived at Richard's property, they found a terrifying scene. 3 men dressed in black circled the house, testing windows and doors. One of them was talking on the phone, clearly coordinating some kind of operation. "They're professionals," whispered Father Michael. "They're not common thugs." Richard watched his house being invaded with a mixture of anger and despair. Somewhere inside, Lily was hidden and terrified, while Rose, in her deteriorated mental state, was trying to protect her. "I need to get in," he said, "not through the front door. Is there another way?" "There's an old tunnel that connects the basement to the outdoor cellar. It was built during the time of slavery." "Then that's how we're going." They circumvented the property carefully, avoiding the guards. The entrance to the tunnel was hidden, behind a bush, near the abandoned cellar. It was narrow and dark, but offered direct access to the basement of the house. As they crawled through the damp tunnel, Richard could hear voices coming from above. The invaders had entered the house and were systematically searching for Lily and Rose. "Where are the women?" shouted a rough male voice. "Search every room! They can't have gone far!" When they reached the basement, they found Lily crouched, behind old wine boxes, hugging Rose, who was clearly in a state of total confusion. "Uncle Richard Huntington," whispered Lily when she saw him emerge from the tunnel. "I knew you would come." "Where are we?" asked Rose, looking around with a lost expression. "Who are these people?" "We're hiding, Grandma," said Lily patiently. "The bad men are looking for us." Father Michael emerged from the tunnel behind Richard. "We need to get out of here now. They'll find the basement soon." "How?" asked Richard. "The house is surrounded." "Through the same tunnel, but we have to go straight to the car and leave town immediately." "And where are we going?" "To Albany. I have contacts there who can help us deliver the evidence to the right authorities." At that moment, they heard heavy footsteps descending the basement stairs. The invaders had found the entrance. "Quick!" whispered Father Michael. Lily helped Rose enter the tunnel first, followed by Father Michael. Richard went last, carrying a backpack with the documentary evidence that Robert had hidden. When they emerged on the other side, they could hear shouts of frustration coming from the house. The invaders had discovered the empty tunnel. "They'll know we use this path," said Richard as they ran to the priest's car. "It doesn't matter. What matters is getting to Albany before they organize a chase." As they drove away from the property, Lily looked out the back window and saw her house, the first place where she had felt truly safe, disappearing into the distance. "Are we going to be able to come back someday?" she asked. "We will," promised Richard, although he wasn't sure that he could keep that promise. "When all of this is over, we're going to be able to go home." But as they drove down the dark road towards Albany, with Rose asleep in the front seat and Lily leaning on his shoulder, Richard knew that their lives had changed forever. They were no longer ordinary people living a simple life in the countryside. Now they were fugitives, carrying evidence that could destroy powerful and corrupt men, and what haunted him most, even if they managed to expose the whole truth, Rose was sick, and Lily had once again lost the stability she so desperately needed. The fight for justice was costing exactly what he most wanted to protect, the happiness and safety of his family. "Uncle Richard Huntington," murmured Lily sleepily. "After we deliver my father's papers, are the bad men going to stop chasing us?" "Yes," he lied softly. "After that, you're going to be able to be just a normal girl, going to school and playing in the garden." But as he made that promise, Richard looked in the rearview mirror and saw headlights approaching rapidly on the dark road behind them. The headlights in the rearview mirror were approaching rapidly, and Father Michael floored the accelerator of his old car. The road to Albany was winding and dangerous at night, but there was no choice but to take the risk. "They're gaining ground," said Richard, watching in the rearview mirror. "Hold on tight," replied the priest, taking a sharp curve that made the tires squeal on the asphalt. Lily woke up with the sudden movement, realizing immediately that something was wrong. "Are we being chased?" she asked, with a maturity that was frightening for her 6 years. "We are," admitted Richard, "but we're going to be okay." Rose also awakened, but her confusion was worse. "Where are we? Why are we running? Who are these people in the car?" "Grandma, it's me, Lily," said the girl patiently, holding her grandmother's hand. "We're traveling with Uncle Richard Huntington and Father Michael." "I don't know any Richard Huntington," murmured Rose, looking around fearfully. "I want to go home." Lily's heart broke to see the total confusion in her grandmother's eyes. It was as if Rose was gradually disappearing, leaving only shadows of who she had been. At that moment, the sound of a siren echoed behind them. The pursuers had called in police reinforcements, or at least men disguised as police officers. "Father, they have sirens," said Richard. "That means they have official support. Or they're pretending to have it. Colonel Davenport has the resources to get any equipment." The chase continued for another 20 minutes, with the priest's car making desperate maneuvers on the mountainous roads. It was then that Father Michael had a risky idea. "There's an old detour that leads to an abandoned monastery," he said. "I know it because I served there when I was a seminarian. If we can get there without being seen, we can hide until dawn. And then, I have a contact in the monastery, Brother Thomas. He has a faster car and knows alternative routes to Albany." Father Michael made a sudden turn to the right, entering a dirt road almost invisible among the trees. The car swayed violently over the rocks and holes, but the pursuers' headlights passed straight ahead, not noticing the detour. "We made it," whispered Richard. "For now," corrected the priest. The abandoned monastery was an 18th century stone construction, half in ruins but still imposing against the night sky. There were some lights in the windows, indicating that there were still residents. Brother Thomas, a man of 70 years, with white beard and kind eyes, received them with surprise but without hesitation when Father Michael quickly explained the situation. "Of course you can stay," he said. "There are empty rooms upstairs, but if you are being chased by Colonel Davenport, you need to know that he has influence even here." "How long can we stay?" asked Richard. "Until dawn, at most. After that, You need to continue your journey, or everyone here will be in danger. They settled in Rose and Lily in a simple but clean room with 2 narrow beds and a crucifix on the wall. Rose fell asleep quickly, exhausted by the confusion and stress, but Lily remained awake, looking out the window at the darkness outside. "Uncle Richard Huntington," she said, when he came to check on them. "Grandma isn't going to get better, is she?" The girl's direct question caught him off guard. "Why do you ask that?" "Because every time she forgets me, it takes longer for her to remember who I am. And today, she didn't remember at all." Richard sat on the edge of the bed, choosing his words carefully. "Grandma Rose is sick, Lily. It's a disease that makes her forget things. Is she going to forget me forever?" "It might be that way," he admitted, feeling his heart break. "But that doesn't mean she doesn't love you. Her love for you is in her heart, even when her mind gets confused." Lily was silent for a long moment. "And then? When she can't take care of me anymore? I'll take care of you. Forever. Even if it's dangerous, even if the bad men keep chasing us? Even then," promised Richard, "you're my family. Nothing will change that." That night, while Lily finally fell asleep, Richard and Father Michael met with Brother Thomas to plan their next steps. "Is the evidence that you carry," said Thomas, "really enough to destroy Davenport?" "It is," confirmed Richard, "but it needs to reach the right people, and those people need to be willing to face a very powerful man." "I know someone who can help," said Thomas. "Dr. Eleanor Vance, a federal prosecutor in Albany. She's been investigating corruption in the region for years, but she's never had enough evidence. Is she trustworthy?" "Completely, and more importantly, she has federal protection. Davenport can't touch her easily." "Then she's the one we're going to." "There's a problem," said Father Michael. "How are we going to get to Albany? They're going to be watching all the main roads." "I have an idea," said Thomas. "Tomorrow morning, a donation truck for an orphanage in Albany will pass by here. The driver is trustworthy. You can go hidden in the cargo." "And Rose? She's too confused for a trip like that." "I'll stay with her," said Thomas without hesitating. "At least until the situation is resolved. This monastery is a safe place, and she will have proper care." Richard looked at Father Michael, seeing the pain on the religious man's face. Leaving Rose behind meant separating the family that they had fought so hard to protect. "We can't separate them," said Richard finally. "Lily needs her grandmother." "Richard," said Father Michael softly, "Rose is getting increasingly confused. A dangerous trip like this can be too traumatic for her, and for Lily too, seeing her grandmother in a constant state of panic." It was an impossible decision, but Richard knew that the priest was right. Taking Rose in her current condition would be dangerous for everyone. The next morning, the farewell was one of the hardest things that Lily had ever faced. Rose had woken up relatively lucid, understanding that something important was happening. "My dear," she said to Lily, holding the girl's face between her hands, "you're going to have to be very brave now." "I don't want to leave Grandma," cried Lily. "I know, my dear, but sometimes we need to do difficult things to protect those we love. Do you understand?" Lily nodded through her tears. "Do you promise that you'll study hard? That you'll use all that beautiful intelligence that God gave you?" "I promise." "And do you promise that you'll be happy? That you won't let sadness take over your heart?" "I promise," whispered Lily. Rose then turned to Richard. "Take good care of my girl. She's all that I have left that's good in the world." "I'll take care of her as if she were my own daughter," he promised. The truck arrived shortly after dawn. The driver, Mr. Johnson, was a simple but kind man who transported donations of clothes and books to orphanages. He created a hidden space between the boxes where Richard and Lily could settle in. As the truck began to move, Lily waved through. The small opening between the boxes, seeing Rose and Brother Thomas get smaller and smaller in the distance. "Am I going to see Grandma again?" she asked. "We're going to try," said Richard, although he didn't know if it would be possible. During the 3-hour trip to Albany, hidden among donations for orphaned children, Lily remained strangely quiet. Only when they were arriving in the city did she speak again. "Uncle Richard Huntington, when we deliver my father's papers, are they going to arrest the bad men?" "I hope so." "And then can we go back to our house and pick up Grandma?" "After that we'll see what's possible," he said carefully. But as the truck entered the busy streets of Albany, Richard couldn't help but think that even if they managed to expose Colonel Davenport and his accomplices, the losses had already been enormous. Rose was sick and far away, their house had been invaded, and Lily had once again lost the stability she so desperately needed. Justice had a high price, and he was beginning to wonder if he would be able to pay it without destroying exactly what he most wanted to protect: Lily's childhood and happiness. When they arrived at Dr. Eleanor Vance's office, Lily held Richard's hand tightly. "I'm scared," she admitted. "I am too," he said, "but sometimes we need to be brave even when we're scared." "Is this going to make everything okay?" "I hope so, my dear, I hope so." Dr. Eleanor Vance's office was on the 10th floor of a modern building in downtown Albany. When Richard and Lily arrived, escorted by Father Michael, who had reached them using other transportation, the prosecutor received them with a mixture of curiosity and professional caution. Dr. Vance was a woman of 40 years, brown hair tied, in a strict bun and piercing eyes that seemed to evaluate every word before it was spoken. Her office was filled with stacked processes and scattered documents, evidence of a career dedicated to combating corruption. "Father Michael told me that you have evidence related to Colonel Davenport," she said, gesturing for them to sit down. "I need to warn you that I've tried to investigate him several times without success. He has protection at high levels." "This time it's different," said Richard, placing the folder with the documents on the table. "This evidence was collected by my brother Robert before he was murdered 6 years ago." Dr. Vance frowned. "Robert Huntington?" The case was closed as an accident. "Because Davenport corrupted the investigation," said Father Michael. "Robert discovered a money laundering scheme that involved the Huntington family's coffee company and several other companies in the region." While the adults talked, Lily remained quiet next to Richard, watching the serious woman who could decide the future of all of them. There was something in the way the prosecutor moved, in the determination in her eyes, that made Lily feel a small spark of hope. Dr. Vance opened the folder and began to examine the documents. As she read, her expression gradually changed from skepticism to surprise and finally to something close to shock. "My God," she murmured, holding a spreadsheet with bank transactions. "This here implicates not only Davenport, but the current mayor, 2 state representatives, and at least 3 sheriffs in the region." "That's why Robert was killed," said Richard. "And that's why we're running now. Davenport found out that we have these documents." "And this child?" asked the prosecutor, looking at Lily. "What's her connection with all of this?" "She's Robert's daughter, the only survivor of the fire that killed her parents." Dr. Vance studied Lily with new understanding. "So she's a witness?" "No," said Richard quickly. "She was just a baby. She doesn't remember anything. But she represents a threat to Davenport, for what she symbolizes, the living proof that the fire wasn't accidental." At that moment, Lily surprised everyone by speaking. "Doctor, are my father's papers going to make the bad men stop chasing us?" The girl's direct question caught Dr. Vance off guard. She leaned forward, speaking directly to Lily. "I'm going to do everything I can to make that happen," she promised, "but I need you to be very brave for a little while longer." "I'm brave," said Lily simply. "Grandma Rose taught me to be." "Where is her grandmother now?" asked the prosecutor to Richard. In a monastery on the outskirts. She's sick. Memory problems. Dr. Vance's expression softened. This child has lost a lot, hasn't she? More than any child should lose, confirmed Father Michael. The prosecutor went back to examining the documents for a few more minutes. Finally, she looked up with determination. These documents are enough to open a full federal investigation, she said, but you need to understand that this will take time. Months, maybe years. And during that time, asked Richard, you're going to need protection. I'm going to request that you enter the Witness Protection Program. Does that mean we'll have to change our identities, hide forever? Not necessarily forever, but until we manage to arrest Davenport and dismantle the entire network. Lily pulled on Richard's sleeve. Does that mean I won't be able to see Grandma Rose? The question silenced the entire room. It was the cruel dilemma of the situation. To protect Lily, they would have to distance her even further from the only maternal figure she knew. Maybe we can arrange supervised visits, said Dr. Vance carefully. But I can't promise anything until we assess the level of risk. Jishtit. At that moment, Dr. Vance's secretary entered the room with an urgent expression. Doctor, there are men on the ground floor asking about visitors who arrived today. They say they're from the state police, but they didn't present proper identification. Everyone's blood ran cold. Davenport had found out where they were. Emergency exit, said Dr. Vance immediately, standing up. Now! She quickly led them through a corridor to a fire escape in the back of the building. My car is in the underground parking lot. We're going to have to run. They ran down the stairs, with Lily being carried by Richard when her small legs couldn't keep up with the pace. They reached the underground parking lot where they found Dr. Vance's car, a black sedan with tinted windows. Where are we going? Asked Father Michael as they got into the vehicle. To a safe house that I use for cases. Like this, replied the prosecutor, starting the engine. You're going to stay there while I organize the official protection. They left the parking lot through the back exit ramp, avoiding the main entrance, where there were probably lookouts. But when they reached the street, Richard saw in the side rear-view mirror that they were being followed again. They saw us, he said. I expected that, replied Dr. Vance, remaining calm. That's why we're going to a location that they don't know. During the tense journey through the streets of Albany, Lily asked a question that revealed her exceptional perception of the situation. Doctor, why don't the bad men give up? Why don't they stop chasing us? Because they have too much to lose if the truth is discovered, explained Dr. Vance. Powerful people sometimes do terrible things to keep their secrets. But isn't it easier to stop doing bad things? Oui. The innocence of the question touched everyone in the car deeply. It should be, said the prosecutor, but some people get so involved with wrong things that they think they can't go back. The safe house was a simple residence in a middle-class, old neighborhood carefully chosen to not draw attention. It had 3 bedrooms, a small but functional kitchen, and most importantly, a discreet but efficient security system. You're going to stay here while I process the documents and organize the official protection, explained Dr. Vance. There will be federal agents watching discreetly, but please don't leave the house without authorization. For how long? Asked Lily. I don't know yet, dear, but I'm going to do everything as quickly as possible. That night, settled in the safe house, Lily had trouble sleeping. She was in a strange place, far from Rose, not knowing when she would be able to go home. Uncle Richard Huntington, she said when he came to check on her, do you think I did something wrong? Why do you ask that? Because since I was born, bad people keep trying to hurt me. Maybe if I didn't exist— No, interrupted Richard firmly, sitting on the edge of the bed. You didn't do anything wrong. What's happening isn't your fault. Then why do I have to hide? Why did Grandma have to get sick? Why can't I just be a normal girl? Lily's questions echoed Richard's own frustrations. He had promised to protect her, but each decision seemed to distance her further from the normal life she deserved. Sometimes life puts difficult challenges in our way, he said carefully, but that doesn't mean we're not going to have happy days again. Promise? I promise that I'm going to do everything I can for you to be happy. And Grandma, is she going to get better? Richard hesitated. He didn't want to lie to Lily, but he also didn't want to destroy her hope. Grandma's illness is difficult, he said finally. But the love that she has for you will never disappear, even when she gets confused. Lily nodded, seeming to accept that answer. Uncle Richard Huntington, when all of this is over, can I choose where we're going to live? Of course. Where would you like to live? In a place where Grandma can stay with us, and where I can go to school every day, and where there's a garden for me to draw with sticks. Lily's simple request broke Richard's heart. All she wanted was a normal life, with her family together, learning and playing like any 6-year-old child. I'm going to do everything possible to make that happen, he promised. But as he spoke, Richard didn't know if he would be able to keep that promise. The fight against Davenport was just beginning, and he was beginning to understand that even when they won, if they won, some losses were already irreversible. Rose was sick and may never be the same again. Their house had been violated, and Lily, at 6 years old, had already seen more suffering and instability than many people see in a lifetime. The justice had a price, and Richard was beginning to wonder if it wasn't too high. 3 weeks passed in the safe house, and the tension was beginning to affect everyone. Lily had become quieter and more withdrawn, spending hours looking out the window or drawing melancholic figures on paper. Richard noticed how she whispered to herself sometimes, talking to an imaginary Grandma Rose when the longing became unbearable. Dr. Vance visited regularly with updates on the investigation. Robert's evidence had triggered a massive federal operation, but Colonel Davenport and his allies were fighting back with all the resources available. We obtained arrest warrants for 3 of those involved, she reported on a rainy morning. But Davenport is still free. His lawyers are managing to postpone every step of the process. And what does that mean for us? Asked Richard. That you're still not safe. Davenport is desperate, and desperate men do unpredictable things. How much longer will we have to stay hidden? I don't know. Maybe months. The answer hit Lily like a punch. Months, she repeated, her tears beginning to flow. I can't wait months to see Grandma. Dr. Vance knelt next to the girl. Lily, I know it's hard, but you don't know, exploded Lily with an anger that surprised everyone. You didn't lose your mother and father. You didn't have to leave your sick grandma alone. You don't understand anything. It was the first time that Lily had expressed her frustration so directly. Richard moved to console her, but she moved away. And you don't understand either, she said to Richard. You think protecting me means separating me from everyone I love. Lily's words echoed through the room like a sentence. Richard realized that in his attempt to protect her physically, he had ignored her emotional needs. You're right, he admitted. I'm not understanding what you really need. I need my grandma, said Lily between sobs. I don't care if it's dangerous. I want to see her. Dr. Vance and Richard exchanged glances. They knew that keeping Lily away from Rose for much longer could cause permanent psychological damage. Maybe we can arrange a visit, said the prosecutor carefully, very well supervised with a complete security scheme. When? Asked Lily immediately. I need to organize everything first, but maybe at the end of the week. That night, Richard received a call that would change everything. It was Brother Thomas from the monastery, and his voice was loaded with urgency and sadness. Richard, I need to talk to you about Rose. What happened? She had a very serious episode today. She can't recognize anyone anymore, not even me. And she's constantly calling for Lily. Richard's heart tightened. How is she physically? Fragile. Very fragile. The doctors who examined her said that the stress of the separation accelerated the progression of the disease. What does that mean? It means that if Lily wants to say goodbye properly to her grandmother, she can't wait much longer. Reality hit Richard like an avalanche. Rose was dying, and Lily could lose her maternal figure without having the chance for one last moment together. "Brother Thomas, I'm taking Lily there tomorrow," he decided. "But what about the security? We're going to have to risk it. I can't let Lily live with the regret of not having said goodbye to her grandmother." The next morning, Richard told Lily the truth about Rose's condition. The girl listened in silence, her tears falling quietly on her clasped hands. "Is she going to die?" she asked finally. "We don't know," said Richard honestly, "but she's very sick and she needs you." "Then let's go," said Lily, with a determination that surprised Richard. "I don't care if the bad men find us. Grandma needs me." Dr. Vance initially opposed the plan, but when she saw Lily's resolution, she agreed to organize a federal escort to the monastery. The trip was tense, with cars of federal agents escorting the vehicle where Richard, Lily, and Father Michael were. But when they arrived at the monastery, nothing could have prepared Lily for what she found. Rose was in a wheelchair in the monastery garden, looking vaguely at the flowers without seeming to recognize where she was. Her hair was completely white now, and she had lost a lot of weight. When Lily approached, Rose looked up without showing recognition. "Grandma," said Lily softly, kneeling next to the wheelchair. Rose studied her for a long moment, as if trying to locate a lost memory. Then, gradually, something changed in her expression. My girl," she whispered. "It's me, Grandma, your Lily." "Lily," repeated Rose, as if the name was a magic word that brought light to her confusion. "My little Lily. I came to see you. I missed you." Rose extended a trembling hand and touched Lily's face. "You've grown," she said with a weak smile. "You're so beautiful." "Grandma is beautiful too," lied Lily gently. During the next 2 hours, Lily remained next to Rose, telling her about the things she had learned, about the books she had read, about the drawings she made. Rose listened attentively when she managed to concentrate and smiled in moments of greater lucidity. "Lily," said Rose during a moment of mental clarity, "I need to tell you something important." "What is it, Grandma?" "You've always been the most important thing in my life. Since the day I found you in the middle of that fire, you gave me a reason to live." "Grandma saved me," said Lily. "No, my dear, you saved me. You taught me that love can be stronger than any pain." Rose paused, struggling to keep her thoughts organized. "I want you to know that everything we did was for love. All the difficult decisions, all the sacrifices." "I know, Grandma. And I want you to be happy. Even when I'm not here anymore to take care of you, I want you to choose happiness." "Don't talk like that," said Lily, her tears returning. "It's important to talk," insisted Rose with surprising strength. "You have a family now. Richard loves you like a father. Let him take care of you. But Grandma is my family too. I'll always be. Even when my mind forgets everything, my heart will remember you forever." When it came time to leave, the farewell was one of the most difficult things that Lily had ever faced. Rose had returned to the state of confusion, but held the girl's hand with surprising strength. "Don't go," she murmured. "Please, don't leave me alone." "I'll always be with Grandma," promised Lily. "Even far away, I'll always be in Grandma's heart." In the car back to Albany, Lily was absolutely silent for more than an hour. Finally she spoke. "Uncle Richard Huntington, Grandma isn't going to get better, is she?" "Probably not," he admitted, "and I won't be able to see her again until they arrest the bad men?" "Maybe not." Lily nodded, as if she were making an important decision. Then I want them to be arrested soon. Not for me, but for Grandma. She deserves to die in peace, knowing that we managed to defeat the men who killed my parents. Lily's maturity impressed everyone in the car. At 6 years old, she had understood that sometimes we fight not only for ourselves, but for the people we love. We're going to do it, promised Richard. For her, for your parents, and for you. And then, when everything is over, what's going to happen to me? You're going to be my daughter officially, if you want. And we're going to build a new life. In a city where you can be happy. And can I choose the place? You can choose everything. Then I want to live near the monastery, said Lily, so I can visit Grandma whenever she needs me. That night, back at the safe house, Lily fell asleep hugging a drawing that she had made during the visit. A white-haired woman in a garden, surrounded by little angels. In the corner of the paper, she had written with her childish handwriting, "For Grandma Rose, who taught me that love is never lost." It was the most beautiful and saddest drawing that Richard had ever seen. And in it, he understood that Lily had found a way to transform her pain into something beautiful, something that honored the love that Rose had given her. The fight wasn't over yet, but for the first time in weeks, Richard felt that there was hope that they would be able not only to survive, but to rebuild their lives on solid foundations of love and truth. 6 months passed since the visit to the monastery, and finally the day had arrived that would change everything. Dr. Vance called the safe house one spring morning with the news that everyone was waiting for. Colonel Davenport and all his network of corruption had been arrested by the federal police. "It's over," she said, her voice loaded with relief and satisfaction. "We have confessions, irrefutable evidence, and arrest warrants served. You're free." Lily, now 7 years old, received the news with a serenity that impressed Richard. During the months of waiting, she had matured in an extraordinary way, developing an emotional wisdom that touched everyone around her. "Can I see Grandma now?" was her first question. "You can," replied Dr. Vance. "You can go wherever you want." That same afternoon, Richard and Lily left for the monastery. During the trip, Lily was quiet, looking out the window at the familiar landscapes of upstate New York that she hadn't seen in so long. "Uncle Richard Huntington," she said finally, "do you think Grandma will recognize me?" "I don't know, my dear, but the important thing is that you're going to be there with her. Even if she doesn't know who I am. Even then, sometimes love doesn't need recognition to exist." When they arrived at the monastery, Brother Thomas received them with a sad smile. "Rose is in the garden," he said. "She spends most of her time there, always looking in the direction of the road, as if she were waiting for someone." Lily ran ahead, her footsteps echoing through the stone corridors of the monastery. When she reached the garden, she found Rose, sitting in a rocking chair, even more fragile than the last time, but with her eyes turned exactly towards the entrance of the garden. "Grandma!" called Lily, running towards her. Rose looked up, and, to everyone's surprise, smiled immediately. "My girl," she said with surprising clarity, "I knew you would come back." "Does Grandma recognize me?" asked Lily, kneeling next to the chair. "Of course I recognize you. You're my Lily, the smartest and bravest girl in the world." Richard remained silent, observing the meeting. In recent months, Rose had had fewer and fewer moments of lucidity, but Lily's presence seemed to awaken something deep in her fragmented memory. "Grandma, the bad men have been arrested," said Lily. "We won't need to hide any more." "That's good, my dear. That means you can be happy now." "I want to be happy here, near Grandma." Rose held Lily's face between her trembling hands. "My dear, you can't waste your life taking care of a confused old woman like me. You have a whole life ahead of you, but I want to take care of Grandma, like Grandma took care of me, and you already took care. You gave me love, joy, purpose. Now it's time for you to live your own life. With Uncle Richard Huntington, "I'm with whoever makes you happy," said Rose, looking at Richard with gratitude in her eyes. "He's a good man. He'll take good care of you." In the weeks that followed, a new routine was established. Richard rented a small house in the town near the monastery, where he and Lily went to live. Every morning, Lily went to the local school, where her exceptional talent for mathematics quickly caught the attention of the teachers. Every afternoon, she visited Rose at the monastery. Rose's condition continued to deteriorate gradually, but she had moments of lucidity, especially when she was with Lily. It was as if the love for the girl was an anchor that kept her connected to reality. "Lily is flourishing," commented Brother Thomas one afternoon. "It's impressive how she manages to balance her studies, the visits here, and still maintain a joyful spirit." "She has an extraordinary inner strength," agreed Richard. "Sometimes I think she's wiser than all of us." It was one autumn afternoon, 6 months after their return, that something important happened. Lily was in the monastery garden, showing Rose a math problem that she had solved at school, when her grandmother had a moment of total clarity that lasted almost an hour. "Lily," said Rose, her voice firmer than it had been in months, "I need to tell you something about your parents." "What is it, Grandma?" "Robert and Marina loved you very much. In the last days before the fire, they spoke constantly about the dreams they had for you. They wanted you to study, to be happy, to use your intelligence to help other people. Did they know I was intelligent even as a baby? They knew. Robert said you had curious eyes, that you always paid attention to everything around you. He was sure that you would be special, and would they be proud of me now?" "Very proud," said Rose, kissing Lily's forehead. "You became exactly the girl they dreamed you would be, brave, intelligent, kind. Grandma, can I ask you a question?" "Of course, my dear." "Do you regret having saved me that night? Of having lost your peaceful life to take care of me?" Rose held Lily's hands tightly. "Lily, saving you was the best thing I did in my life. You gave me more happiness in 6 years than I had in all the years before. Even with all the problems, even having to flee and hide. Even so, the love we shared was worth every difficult moment." That night, Rose fell asleep peacefully in her bed at the monastery. The next morning, Brother Thomas found a note that she had written during the night, in one of her last moments of lucidity, "To my dear Lily, thank you for letting me be your grandmother. Thank you for teaching me that love can transform any pain into joy. Be happy, study hard, and always remember that you are loved. To Richard, take good care of our girl. She is a gift from God to this world." Rose passed away peacefully 3 days later, while sleeping, with Lily holding her hand. The funeral was simple but touching. The entire community of Oak Creek attended, including many people that Rose had helped over the years without anyone knowing. Father Michael celebrated the Mass, speaking about a woman who had found her life's mission, saving a child from the flames. "Rose taught us that family isn't just about blood," he said. "It's about choice, love, and sacrifice. She chose to love Lily as a daughter, and through that love, both saved each other." Lily didn't cry during the funeral. Instead, she remained serene, holding Richard's hand and whispering occasionally to Rose, as if she could still hear her. After the ceremony, when everyone had left, Lily asked to be alone at the graveside for a few minutes. "Grandma," she said to the simple headstone, "I promise that I'm going to study hard and use my intelligence to help other children like me. I promise that I'm going to be happy like you wanted. And I promise that I'll never forget that you taught me that love is stronger than any fear." 6 months later, on a sunny spring morning, Lily was in the garden of the new house that Richard had bought, a yellow house with a large yard, very similar to the first house where they had been happy together. She was solving advanced math, problems with sticks in the dirt, just like she did as a child. Richard watched her through the kitchen window, marveling at how she had become a balanced, intelligent and loving girl despite everything she had been through. "Dad," said Lily. She had started calling him that after the official adoption. "Can I show you something?" "Of course," he replied, going out to the garden. "I solved a problem that the teacher said was at university level," she said proudly, showing her calculations in the dirt. "Impressive," said Richard. "Your biological parents and Grandma Rose would be very proud." "I know," said Lily simply. "I feel them with me sometimes, especially when I'm studying." "And how do you feel now? Happy?" Lily thought for a moment, looking at the birds that sang in the trees in the yard. "I miss Grandma every day, and sometimes I get sad remembering everything we went through. But I also feel very grateful." "Grateful for what?" "For having had so many people who loved me, for having you now as a father, for being able to study and have dreams, and mainly for having learned that even when bad things happen, something good can always come after." That afternoon, Lily received a letter that left her radiant. It was a full scholarship to a specialized school for gifted children, the result of the exams she had taken recently. "Dad," she shouted, running to show the letter, "can I go to this school?" "If that's what you want, of course you can." "And can I choose what to study when I grow up?" "You can choose everything in your life," promised Richard. "Then I want to study to help other children who have gone through difficult things like me. I want to be someone who protects children." Richard hugged his adopted daughter, understanding that Lily had found not only her vocation, but also a way to transform her pain into purpose. That night, while putting Lily to bed, Richard reflected on the extraordinary journey that they had traveled together. It had started with a girl being humiliated in a church and an embittered man watching from the window. Now they had a real family, built on genuine love and mutual respect. "Dad," said Lily sleepily, "thank you for not giving up on me." "Thank you for teaching me what really matters in life," he replied. "Tomorrow can I draw new birds in the yard?" "You can draw as many birds as you want, free birds flying high." "Like us," murmured Lily, falling asleep with a peaceful smile. And it was true. After so much suffering, so much fear, so much struggle, they had finally found their freedom. Not the freedom of not having problems, but the freedom to face them together as a family, with love and courage. On Lily's bedside table, next to a photo of Rose, there was a new drawing, a yellow house surrounded by colorful birds, with two figures holding hands in front, one tall and one small, smiling at the future that they would build together.